Hi guys, welcome back to Too Cool for Middle School. I'm doing one of those videos today that gets requested a lot, and I'm just never quite sure what to say since I have, just only my perspective that I'm coming from. But I thought it'd be a great idea to partner with Miss Tierraney here on YouTube for this video so that you can get both of our perspectives about what we wish we knew when we were new teachers. Miss Tierraney teaches 3rd and 4th grade math and science, and then I teach 6th and 8th grade history and English. So we kind of cover everything, I feel like, subject-wise and then age-wise. Hopefully somewhere in here our advice can pertain to you. And I just want to say also that Miss Tierraney also has like another channel and like email group that is specifically for Christian educators, and I love that she has started that. I joined the email group. She does like live chats and stuff sometimes. That's separate from this video, but if you are also interested in something like that, check her out. I love that she's doing that just for teachers, and it's really encouraging to me. So the beginning of my teaching career was a little bit like bumpy just because first I did student teaching, and that was an entire year long, so it felt kind of like my first year of teaching. I taught at a high school, and I had 10th grade world history and 11th grade US history, and then I also subbed a lot for AP art history and AVID, so I felt like I had a full year experience of teaching high school, so I can talk a little bit about that. The following year was like this horrible drought of teacher jobs in California, and so I didn't have a regular teaching job. I just ran after school programs for the YMCA in inner city Long Beach at middle schools, so I can also talk a little bit about that. And then my first real teaching job was actually a part-time 8th grade US history job at another middle school. And then my first full-time teaching job was 6th grade English and 8th grade US history at another school. I just kind of had to bounce around a lot at the beginning in order to get my foot in the door anywhere and get experience. And I mean, that might be my first piece of advice, is that depending on where you are, you might have to move to get a job. I was working kind of in a suburb of LA. My husband worked in South Central LA, and then he got a job kind of north of LA, and like we had to move around a lot to find steady jobs. It's not always steady employment. There are layoffs, there are budget cuts. Even me this year, being in a new district, they had to pass like an extra bond measure thing, so like the residents of the city paid a little bit extra tax so that I could keep my job. But if that had not passed, I would have gotten laid off again and been on the job hunt again. So while you're new, it can be a little bit nerve-wracking because you're just not sure how long you're going to be there. Even if they love you, they might not be able to keep you. Okay, so let's talk about something that I learned my first year of student teaching. The year actually went great. I loved teaching high school. I had a couple of like honors classes, and so most of my behavior was fabulous. Like, they were very motivated. It was a good school. My master teachers were really good and had set the tone of respect even before I got there. And I mean, I was young. I was like 24. I think I was 24 when I started student teaching, and my students were like 17, 18. But I didn't really have too many issues with like disrespect or like goofing off too much in class. Content-wise, I really studied. I really made sure I knew what I was talking about, because I didn't want to give those kids any reason to doubt me or disrespect me. But the thing that I wish I had known had more to do with like making sure that I had a future job. So it was a very busy year for me. I taught, I think if I remember right, I taught first and second period in one of the classes, forget which one, and then the other master teacher was next door, so then next door I taught third and fourth period. So I taught up until lunch, and then at lunch I went home and got something to eat, and then certain days of the week I would have to drive about an hour and a half to campus, where I would take classes for my credential class from 4 to 7 and then 7 to 10, and then come all the way back and go teach again in the morning. Or on other days, I would drive an hour and a half in a different direction and teach piano lessons. And that's what I did like after school got out. So from like 3 till like 8:30 at night. So I had just gotten married. My husband taught at a private school and coached. So we were, trying to make ends meet with piano lessons and private school salary and like a coaching stipend. And so I was just very focused on like the here and now. Like I need to get my credential, I need to pay my bills, and I didn't look ahead to getting hired at that school. Like I had great relationships with my master teachers and they would have hired me in an instant, but there weren't any job openings that were supposed to come up the following year. So what I didn't do was go to like the after school staff meetings or professional development meetings. I didn't make much of an effort to get to know the principal. I just like assumed he didn't have any time for me, and maybe he didn't, but I had like one meeting with him and I think he observed me once, but I should have figured out a way to be at some of those staff meetings and to get to know the principal a little bit better, because the following school year, a couple days in, one of the history teachers decided to quit. He was gonna like run for public office or something. So an opening did come up that they didn't expect. And this is kind of weird. This was like a really weird thing. I did apply for it. I did get it. And then the district office called back later and said that I wasn't getting it. Like this was after we had already like paid rent on an apartment and like changed all of our plans. And it turned out, like I found out months later, like it was totally nepotism and they like hired somebody's nephew or something. It was really messed up. So I learned two things from that situation though. Number one, if I had a really strong relationship with that principal, maybe he would have like backed me up a little bit more and kind of fought back against the district office a little bit. And if I had really been a presence at that school, maybe there would have been more teachers that could have like, I don't know, stood up for me or something. But I just didn't really do that. I made great relationships with my master teacher, but not necessarily with like the whole administration. So I should have done that. I was just focused on getting my bills paid. So that's tough. Some of you might be in that same situation, but I should have just, canceled on my students a few times and gone to staff meetings. I don't know if that would have made a difference in the long run, but maybe it could have. And then the other thing to know from that is that if you ever get offered a job, it's not official until HR offers it to you and until you sign a contract. So the principal called me and said that I was hired, said he loved me, he was all excited, to get me in. And so based on his word, we made all these plans. But then HR has the final say, and they just kind of, you know what, they flew the job again. And even though I had gotten hired the first time, I didn't even get an interview the second time. So there are things that go on at the district office level that you have no control over. And I mean, I shouldn't have trusted the word of the principal, because that's not who has the decision, the final decision. So that sucked. That was such a hard lesson. We had no money because we ended up paying like 2 rents that month, because we thought we were moving, and then we thought, oh, we're moving back to this place. And it was, that was a really trying time. That wasn't fun. And I wish I had known that. I worked at some after school programs in Long Beach, kind of in the inner city, rough part of Long Beach, and I loved it. I loved it. I loved working with those kids. I still remember some of the kids that I had in that after school program, and it was awesome. Now, here's something I learned in that program. My relationships with the kids were great. I was kind of like the principal at the after school programs. So there were other like teachers, I can't even remember what we called them, but they ran, like the different like classes and clubs and stuff, and then I kind of oversaw that. And if there were discipline issues, then they had to come to me, and parents would generally come to me. So I had to learn to kind of be an administrator, like on the fly. And I had this one parent who, right when I got to the school, because because they kind of moved me around to a few different middle schools. So I had gotten to this one school, and the first day I was there, this mom called and said, you know, my daughter really needs to spend extra time on her homework. And I was like, okay, that's fine. Like, we do homework in after school program. And she was like, okay, I really hope you can, you know, work with us on this. I'm like, yeah, sure, we do homework, that's cool. But we did homework for an hour. Like, we were on a grant. When you're on a grant, and this is a free after school program, you have to do what the grant says. Like, they're giving you the money, you have to do what they say. So, you know, we had an hour where we did homework help. We had an hour where we did like these kind of electives that the kids could choose. We had to do snack. We had to do physical activity. So there were, you know, certain things within the grant that you had to do. We couldn't really extend homework time outside of homework time. And so these parents got very upset about that sometimes she wouldn't finish her homework in that hour, mostly because she was messing around, but you know. So I had this parent, he was a father. He was like 6'2", like 250 pounds, like this big dude. And he would come in and just try to intimidate me. I'm like 5'2", it's probably like 115 pounds at the time. He would come in and just try and yell at me and intimidate me, and I couldn't stand that guy. And he didn't scare me. He probably should have scared me a little more than he did. Like, I did not have a good feeling about him, because I knew that he was coming in trying to like intimidate and bully me, and I would just give it right back to him. And one time he called on the phone to say that his daughter didn't get her homework done or whatever, and we, not proud of this, but we got in a shouting match on the phone. He was like, what kind of a teacher are you that you don't help your students get their homework done? Like, you're terrible, you don't care about them. And oh, you better believe I went off right back on him. And there were like students in the room just like, what is happening right now? And I got off the phone and I was just like, and I immediately had to call my supervisor and be like, I just like screamed out a parent. So what I should have done was to call my supervisor before that happened and let him know that like there's this parent that comes in and keeps kind of like trying to threaten me and like bully me into doing whatever he wants and letting his daughter like leave the field while we're doing physical activity time and like do her homework off on the side with no supervision. Like, there are certain things that you just cannot do. Like, parents might ask you to do things and you cannot do them. Like, they are not safe. That's not what the rest of the group is doing. It doesn't matter if you want your kid to do that. It's not happening. And if a parent is really crazy, then you just need to let your administrator know, like, before it gets to the point where you're having a shouting match on the phone. And it turns out he was a total misogynist. Like, apparently he had done that to the principal of the actual school like many times, but then whenever he would meet with a male, he was like super nice. Like, all of the males that talked to me about it, they're like, what, he seems like the nicest guy. I was like, are you freaking kidding me? That guy is a monster. But then I talked to the principal of the school and she was like, oh no, he is horrible. Like, he has stormed into my office more times than you can count. I was like, oh, so I never should have dealt with that on my own. So I should have been talking to the other administrators from the get-go and just like deflecting everything up to them. When you have a crazy parent, just don't deal with them. At least when you're brand new. They're trying to eat you alive probably. Like, they know that you're new, they know that you're young, and they're gonna try and take advantage of you. So move them along to somebody that can shut them down. Okay, so at my next job, that was the part-time job that I loved. Like, I loved, actually, I just taught the first 3 periods of the day. I had 8th grade US history. That's my favorite thing ever to teach. And then really I had the rest of the day when I could have gone home, but I always stayed until like after school, and I would just plan. So I got to spend tons and tons of time lesson planning, and I know most people won't have those extra hours in the day, but I spent probably from like till like, it was like 11:30 until like 3 o'clock every single day lesson planning. I always stayed like a week ahead. I filled out like the full-on lesson plans that I had to do in my credential program that I really didn't have to do anymore, but I just did it anyway so that I would be super prepared, over prepared, planned way out in advance, had my copies made. And so I had a great first year, and I think it was just because I was so prepared. And I think it was also because I would always go eat lunch with the other teachers, and it was so helpful to build relationships with those other teachers. They were so friendly, so nice. I'm still like Facebook friends with a lot of them, and like sometimes I still even see some of those other teachers, like if they're around, like we'll go out for lunch or whatever. I built really great relationships with them, and it was just nice to like get another perspective on the school from people who had been there for a long time, to hear about students' behavior in other classes, you know, that I also had, and kind of hear how other people were dealing with behavior issues and stuff like that. So that made my year great, just by building relationships with my coworkers and by spending tons and tons of time prepping. Maybe the one thing that I wish I had known about that job was that the district did not pay for BITSA. And I have a whole video about BITSA, son of a BITSA. And now they're calling it induction program. But if you live in California, that is something that you have to do. And they kind of keep it a secret from you in your credential program, because I think it would honestly scare people away. And I didn't know much about it until I went into that school year. My principal was like, he like used to work for BITSA or something, and so he was super big on it. He was like pushing it on me. My district refused to pay for it, even though I dug into the law behind it, and I found out they were actually receiving $500,000 a year to run a BITSA program. They just didn't do it, and so then they were making me go to a different district and pay for it out of pocket. And I didn't even have the money. Remember, I was only working part-time. Like, my paycheck had a 1 at the beginning. It had a 1. I was making $1,000 something a month, and this program cost $2,000 for the year. So that was more than like 10% of my paycheck. My principal told me to take out a bank loan to pay for it. Do not do that. Do not do it. This was another example of just where, like, a lot of times the district office or like administrators do not have your back. They know nothing about you, and you do have to look out for yourself. So I went to the school board, and I went to a school board meeting and just explained to them, you know, like, I'm a part-time teacher here, but I stay after school. I coach volleyball for free. I choreograph the school play for free. I stay after and tutor my students. I'm, you know, a really energetic, enthusiastic new teacher. I want to stay in this district and, you know, become a great member of your team. And from the $500,000 that you receive per year to run a BITSA program, I'm requesting $2,000 of that to be paid so that I can go out of district and still do the required BITSA. And they said no. And I emailed, and I went to the meeting, and I had a whole presentation. And to be honest, usually school board members were not teachers. I actually don't think that they knew what BITSA was. I'm almost positive they just didn't even know what I was talking about. So I even I emailed like the superintendent. Like, a lot of the teachers at my school were like, dang, you're a new teacher and you're like ruffling all these feathers. But I didn't have the $2,000 to do it. They were kind of taking advantage of the fact that I was new, and they thought that I didn't know my stuff. But I do. My dad is a superintendent, and my mom's a teacher, and my husband's a teacher, so I usually know my stuff. And when administrators try to take advantage of me, I usually know how to call their bluff. Know about that stuff if possible. If you are a teacher in California, you will have to do some kind of induction, used to be called BITSA. You can do it at universities, or you can do it through some districts. Some offer it, some don't. Some pay for it, some don't. And that, you know, might affect whether or not you want to work in a certain district. So anyway, that was like the only bad thing about that year. I'm just like sharing the bad things because it's the things that I wish I would have known. But honestly, overall, all of my experiences were awesome. I'm just telling you like the one thing that was like, ugh. Now lastly, I'll tell you about my first full-time teaching job, and I had 6th grade English and 8th grade US history. And here's what I wish I would have known when I started there. So I remember that this principal interviewed me and hired me, and then he quit the next day, and then we had a new principal. So when I started the school year, actually I think the first few days we didn't even have a principal, because she still had to go through all the paperwork and everything, and then she came in like the next week. So I was new, the principal was new, they didn't give me a lot of background or like introduction into the school, which is understandable. But like 2 weeks into the school year, we had an active shooter threat. Somebody called and said they were going to shoot up the school. It was 7th period. It was with probably the worst class I've ever had in my teaching career so far. It was 7th period, when normally you would have an elective, but these were the kids that either were like in interventions or for whatever reason didn't get to take an elective, so they still had history the last period of the day. So, you know, of course they're not thrilled about that. It was like 20 boys and 10 girls, maybe like 25 boys and 10 girls, just a lot of kids with behavior problems. And that second week of school, we went on lockdown. The SWAT team was there, fire trucks were there, everything. And I didn't know what to do in the case of a lockdown at that school. At my previous school, we had a lot of lockdowns because there were a lot of drug busts at the apartment complex across the street. So when we had lockdowns, our principal expected us to just keep teaching. So we locked the doors, but he wanted you to just keep teaching because it happened so often. Like, you would hear the helicopters above you, and I remember one of my students was like, "Oh, I think it's my uncle." I was like, "What, in the helicopter?" They're like, "No." Like, So I just continued to keep teaching until I realized like it was getting really bad. And then I didn't know what to do. Like, the door was locked, of course, and we didn't know what was happening. So I turned on the TV and we watched the news to see what was happening. And I shouldn't have done that. You're not allowed to do that. Everything's supposed to be quiet. My students went nuts. I've never seen students go that crazy. They were like standing on tables, taking pictures out the window. They just used it as an excuse to go absolutely crazy. And a lot of the girls were scared, crying in the corner. It was the worst teaching day I've ever had. That was definitely the worst. We were there until like 6 o'clock at night. Kids had to like pee in trash cans. I remember I had a night class for my master's and I couldn't go because I was trapped in the room. The SWAT team came in eventually and let us out, and my kids were still messing around and jumping around and like laughing at the SWAT team with their machine guns and bulletproof vests. Like, during that time, I like gave up on trying to get them to settle down, and I just sat there on my laptop and just documented what every kid was doing, and just had like this running email to the principal letting her know what each kid was doing. And then the next day, I didn't want to let them in my classroom. Like, no, you can't be in my classroom. Like, you put all of us in danger. We didn't know if there was really a shooter or not. And if there had been, they would have come straight for our classroom, for the kids who were being super loud, and then the stupid teacher that had the TV on. But it was just a horrible situation. I wish that they had like briefed me on that. You know, it's not likely that it will happen, but just briefed me on like lockdown procedure before school had started. That was no fun. I didn't even want to go back the next day, but I did, and I was furious, and I took them to the gym and we had a big discussion. We were talking about like the Mayflower and the Mayflower Compact, and how, you know, they were getting off this boat and they didn't know if they were all going to survive. So they all agreed to protect each other and support each other. And we did a Mayflower Compact for our classroom that like we all agree that we're going to protect each other and support each other and not put each other in danger. Ugh. That was crazy. But on the flip side, my 6th graders that year were my favorite class I've ever had. I loved them. I'm like still in contact with some of those students now. I had some of them again when they got into 8th grade. Now they're in high school, and I love them. That's when we started like the drama program, the summer theater production and everything, and I loved it. So overall, that year was wonderful. It was just that one day that wasn't great. So I feel like this video seems a little bit negative, but again, we're just trying to tell you the things that like caught us off guard and that we wish we would have known. But really and truly, none of that stuff drove me out of teaching. You know, like we made it through these things and still stuck with the profession. We love it. We're so glad that this is what we do for a living, but it's not all like apples and roses and wonderfulness every single day. And again, for me, like, it wasn't usually the kids that were the problem. Like, there were administrative issues or like things going on above me that I didn't really have control over. And those things, you just have to arm yourself with as much knowledge as you can, be as professional as you can, not give anybody any reason to doubt you or your professionalism or your dedication to your students. And I guess the other thing to know is that you can make mistakes and learn from them and move on from them. So I shouldn't have turned on the TV. I shouldn't have yelled at that parent. You know, I should have gone to those meetings at my school I student taught at. There are things I should have done, but I'm still fine. I'm teaching. I moved on from those things. You know, now I know better, and life is fine. Life is good. So you might make a mistake and feel really stupid about something that you did, and just know that it will pass. It'll be okay. Anyway, we love you guys. Go check out Miss Tierraney's channel if you haven't already. I hope you have a great rest of your summer and that your school year is off to a wonderful start. If you are a brand new teacher this year, please comment below just so that we can like encourage you and give you a shout out and just make you feel good on your way into your first day of teaching. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.